I'm Dr. Erica Bove, and welcome to the Love and Science podcast. I'm your host, and also the founder of Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility. I'm so excited you're here today. With over a decade of experience helping thousands of women just like you, I empower professional women to build their families with confidence and compassion. Let's dive in. Before we get started, a quick note for our listeners. Today's conversation includes some adult content, particularly around sex and physical intimacy. Depending on where and with whom you're listening, you may want to be mindful of who's around you. With that said, I hope you truly enjoy this open and important conversation. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Love and Science podcast. Today, I have an amazing guest. She is just fabulous. Her name is Dr. Alexandra Stockwell. I have known her for many years. She is a friend. She is a colleague. She is a family medicine physician who now has transformed her career as the intimacy doctor. She's a physician coach and an intimate marriage expert, and she is widely known for her ability to catalyze immediate and meaningful shifts in high-achieving couples who want genuine emotional connection, sensual passion, and a relationship that feels as alive and successful as the rest of their lives. Dr. Alexandra, I'm going to continue welcoming you and singing your accolades, but I just wanted to pause and say, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today.
I am thrilled to be here and very excited about our conversation.
Amazing. So a little more background about you. So for over 20 years, you have worked with men and women to bring real connection back into all aspects of the relationship, from the ordinary texture of daily life to the quality of intimacy in the bedroom. Your clients are growth-oriented, accomplished, and quite confident in most areas of life. They're confronted with the reality that those qualities haven't translated yet to their intimate relationship, or maybe they did before and they've lost it. But I will say the audience here on this podcast is mostly female physicians and other high-achieving women on the fertility journey. And we're going to have this really interesting conversation about the many, many, many layers of what you are an expert in, which is intimacy among couples, and the overlay of the fertility journey.
Yes, absolutely.
Beautiful. And I will also put in a plug. You're the bestselling author of Uncompromising Intimacy, the creator of the Align and Hot Marriage program, and also the Intimate Connection app. And also, this is an amazing podcast, the host of the Intimate Marriage podcast, which is ranked in the top 1% of podcasts globally. It is a podcast I listen to regularly. So people are always like, Dr. Erica, what do you listen to? This. Go listen to her podcast. It is amazing. So again, welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Okay. So I will also share that you were a guest in our support group last week, which was an amazing conversation with lots of great follow-up. And so, I want to talk about some of the things we talked about in our support group, and then also extend that conversation to more questions that were generated after the fact. And, I think perhaps the best place to start is really talking about, when sex either becomes part of the fertility protocol or something that must be avoided at all costs. And I find this particular question to be very stress-inducing, both in terms of this, I'm going to mess this up aspect of things, but then also it can really start to shake at the foundations of, an otherwise healthy couple. So can we start there and talk about sort of your thoughts on, this really interesting and painful at times overlay between, when something is procreative and it has to be sort of done at a certain time, but then also when there is all these rules and taboos, some of which are evidence-based, some of which aren't, that where people get these laundry lists of things to do and not to do. What are your thoughts as an intimacy expert?
What I think, just it's obvious in your question, but sometimes kind of like the emperor has no clothes story, it's really important to just state the very basic thing, which is that sex feels best when we feel like doing it. So to feel like doing it and not be permitted feels like a form of disconnection in marriage. Mm-hmm. And to not feel like doing it, one or both people, and know that it is going to happen with both people's consent, you're going to make this happen. Mm-hmm. That also is, even though we're talking about having sex, it can feel extremely disconnecting to essentially have it because both of your prefrontal cortexes decide it's really important because you deeply yearn for a child. And that, of course, has a lot of feelings in it. But those are not the feelings of erotic responsiveness and desire and a kind of juicy, flirtatious energy, or even a relaxed energy to slowly turn from everyday considerations to have a really sensual and then sexual time together. So just at its foundation, let's be very clear what any couple, any man and any woman on the fertility journey knows, but it's like, you know it as well as you need to breathe air, but it's not often just simply named that sex in this phase of life is essentially extremely incongruent with the states of our hearts and bodies. And
Mm,
one of the things that makes sex really nourishing and hot and fantastic is when there is congruence, mind, body, soul, heart. Like it's the synced up congruence, which creates the sense of timelessness and pleasure and
mhm.
really creates the kind of connection that the great poets write about. And sex during the fertility journey or the infertility journey, whichever way you want to describe it, is fundamentally incongruent.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there because I mean to say it in this way that as you listen, you feel the compassion that both you, Erica, and I have, that sex is hard enough in the context of a busy life and long-term relationship. And there are so many challenges and considerations that every single couple has, unless they just shut down and turn away from sex altogether. But
Mhm.
the intense exacerbation of it when it needs to be scheduled during fertility, really, it's rooted in an experience of incongruence.
I think that's the best description I've ever heard of it. You know, when I was a fellow, I learned the phrase timed intercourse. And we say timed intercourse times three. And I was like, what does that even mean? And is that grounded in science? I thought that was the most disheartening, terrible expression I'd ever heard. Like, do I get out my prescription pad and write that and then hand it to the couple? Like, that is totally such a devaluing. I just hated that expression. I still do, actually. And I think what you're saying is there's this dissonance or these vectors that are going in the different directions. And maybe the mind is saying one thing, but the body is saying another. And then there's that misalignment that can happen with time. And I mean, I will tell you, I spent last weekend I was on call. I spent about 25 minutes on the phone with one of my own patients who they never had any problems in the past until they started trying to have a baby, and they've been trying for 14 months now and really, really disheartened. And they lived about 2.5 hours away from our clinic. And I was trying to talk with them about whether they thought they could have, quote unquote, I never use the expression timed intercourse, whether they could get together at home or whether they needed to come in the next day for an insemination for really functional reasons, right? Because there was new onset erectile dysfunction and they didn't know if they were going to be able to get together. And the the female partner was crying. She paused so she could call her husband. And you might say, "Oh, what's the big deal? Just schedule them for the insemination." But that's missing the point. That's not what they want. That's not their top choice. They want their lives to go back to normal again, and they want to have a baby, right? So I think we have to back up and understand how painful this is for people. And I think you're right. Like, both do this now or don't do this now, like how very complicated that is for people.
Hello, my loves. I am so excited to share this news with you. If you are a female physician navigating the fertility journey and you want a structured, evidence-based plan, I have created a free resource for you. It's called the Physician Fertility Roadmap. I have created a guide to help you optimize your chances of pregnancy and a successful outcome over the next 6 to 12 months. Check out the link in the show notes. Love you. Bye.
Yeah, and I think understanding how deeply this goes for each of them and between them,
Yeah.
that this thing which is meant to create more connection functionally in this context really dials up disconnection and a sense of isolation and inadequacy and like you want to be in it together. That's one of the reasons you want to have a child together. And yet in this very intimate matter, you don't feel in it together, even if you're both in the challenge together. And so we can really talk with specificity about how to navigate this so it creates more connection, whether you're not having sex or you are having sex. And of course, sex generally is defined as penis and vagina. And that's how you and I are using the term. That is very common. One of the things I'm going to talk about shortly is really broadening, not for the purposes of conception, of course, but for the purposes of making love and being essentially connected, to really broaden what we mean by sex, because it really has no reason other than in the procreative context to just mean penis and vagina. But putting that aside for the moment, I think the intense challenge, but also the really wonderful opportunity, is to be intentional and playful and discover how to create more congruence across the board in your communication, in your presence with one another, or you use the word dissonance. So I guess what would the
Like
opposite of that?
resonance? Resonance?
Resonance, beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Resonance
Yeah, yeah.
and consonance. That, I'm going to share an analogy first, or, a related story. So I had a lot of different journalists and podcast hosts contact me during COVID with questions about dating. These are people who haven't met before and connect on a dating app or something like that. And so, of course, COVID was a devastating time when dating wasn't really happening because people weren't leaving their homes. All of that is true. However, for a random hookup, it was terrible. But for cultivating deeper, more meaningful relationships, COVID actually was very helpful, because it meant that dating couples prior to having sex were having more meaningful conversations. We're getting to know one another's personalities more deeply, because all they could do was connect over Zoom. So
Mm-hmm.
I think for the couples who were dating during that time, who actually wanted deeper, more meaningful relationships, not being able to touch one another meant that there was more depth and breadth in the relationship, and it made that first kiss that much more meaningful and not just the result of a cocktail hormone or pressure. So we're obviously not talking about dating here, but I want to use that as a reference point for how being more intentional about getting on the same page, about having your souls sync up and your heart sync up, and in some ways having your bodies really sync up,
Mm.
and just feeling more connected with one another. That definitely is possible. This is not just Pollyanna, wishful thinking. That definitely is possible in this phase. However, It requires intention. It requires clarity. It requires both people to be committed. And it means that if you, like the vast majority of couples, are much more comfortable having sex than talking about sex, well, right now, it's not comfortable having sex. And so you can increase your comfort talking about sex, being able to open up and share hard feelings without either one of you going into problem-solving mode or becoming overwhelmed. Like, you can really increase the capacity of emotional intimacy and aligning sensually when you're not supposed to have sex and when you are supposed to have sex.
I think that is so, so brilliant. And I'll tell you, I work with a lot of couples in my work, and sometimes over Zoom, but actually more and more in my current practice, especially since we're out of COVID, like in the office, and the body language is very telling. Like sometimes couples truly are sitting with their chairs pointed away from each other. And sometimes you can see they're closer together and their hands are being held, or even just those we talked about this, like it's okay to touch each other during the embryo transfer, right? It's this very sterile procedure, but there's no rule against affection, right, during those moments. And so, if you're listening to this podcast and maybe this is a point of struggle, like thinking about in general, am I turning towards my partner more or am I turning away more? And that could be both internal and external, right? Um, yeah.
Absolutely. And this seems like you were referencing it. It's something I covered in the when I was a guest teacher in your program, that so often, this is true in all times in a relationship, when sex isn't going to happen, it's like that has an upstream effect where there's less flirtation, less affection, less non-sexual physical touch, less sensual touch that isn't going to lead to sex. It's like, as human beings, as mammals, there's very little where we have a switch that is either on or off, but we kind of operate as though that's the case. Like, in a very restrictive binary way, if we can't have sex, then we flip the switch and we don't give like a warm, relaxing, connected hug when we see our partner at the end of the day, or we just stop putting our head on his shoulder and just randomly coming up and putting our arms around his waist or holding hands, because it feels like it's just too hard to titrate and also too emotionally complicated to titrate. And so instead of being a yes to what is actually available in abundance, which is affection and non-sexual physical touch and the good hormones and the sense of connection and the oxytocin and so forth through touching, because it can't go all the way to penis and vagina sex, we stop it way in advance and just start touching less. And I think that is just one of the sad, very normal, common behaviors. It's like, if we can't be all the way open, we close all the way down. And the way to change that is slowly, with practice. Notice when you shut down, turn away, when he reaches to touch you and you brace a little bit. It can just be a second where it's like the armor goes up. That's okay. Take a breath and let it fall away. If you're both clear on what the rules are, and if you're not, you should be, at any given phase, like this is a time not to have sex or this is a time to have sex, as long as you're both clear, you're not gonna like lose control and suddenly find yourself having sex when you're not supposed to. You're like, for anyone listening, you are aware, you know what the deal is, and you can really expand your bodies connecting and feeling good with one another. You can even do that with your clothes on,
Sure.
and certainly with your underwear on, in case you feel concerned. But there's like so much feeling good and creating more connection that is genuinely available as long as you both are clear on what the parameters are, what you're not doing, and discovering what you might be doing any given moment.
I think that is also rich, Alexandra. And, what came to my mind is it's kind of like, going from living in color, technicolor, to living in black and white. And we don't even realize the process is happening until it's like, what happened? Why is this so cold? Why is this also sterile? And I will add, as an REI, there's actually not many ways to mess it up. I think that in high achieving people, there's truly a laundry list of rules. And it's like, I have to do this perfectly and that perfectly and the other perfectly. And I will just say, yes, follow what your doctor's office says, but a lot of that is not grounded in science. And so if you truly feel like you have quote unquote messed up, give yourself grace. Call the office. These are sometimes awkward conversations or portal messages to have, but we have them every day. They're not awkward on our end. And so, there's so few things that people can do to really mess
Will you
things
give
up.
an
And so,
example of messing up? Because I'm not an REI and I want to make sure I know exactly what we're talking about.
sure, sure. Okay, so say somebody is told that that they're going to have their insemination on like a Sunday, right? And they're told like 2 to 5 days of abstinence, right, beforehand. And then the something happens and there's an encounter on a Friday night and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's 1.5 days. I've messed this up forever." And and people are just really beating themselves up for not following the instructions, and men are constantly producing sperm, right? Like, unless there's really, really a concern about the sperm number, like that is not going to mess anything up. Or say somebody, has intercourse during an embryo transfer cycle, and they were told on our list of questions, do not have intercourse from the time that you start estrogen until the time that you have a positive heartbeat. I mean, I'm not even going to do the math. That's months. People are told this, and it's outside of science. There's even a study that says that having intercourse during an embryo transfer cycle actually increases chances of success. Kind of like what we were talking about in our support group about all the chemicals and all the hormones. And so, things happen and people say, "Oh my gosh, I messed everything up," or the sperm quality is not going to be good, or, you know, um, we didn't have intercourse 3 days in a row, like the documentation said. And sperm lasts for 2 to 5 days in the genital tract. I mean, there's actually a wide range of how long. I mean, the egg window is shorter, but that's not usually people's problem. And so, people say, "Oh, we had intercourse when we shouldn't have, or this happened and I didn't wait the 5 days." And people just get in their minds. And there's so few things people can, like, is there really anything that people can do? Um,
Okay,
I
well,
can't. Yeah. I mean, this is just me trying to like nip
okay,
fest a little bit.
I'm really loving this. And you, of course, are an REI, and I definitely am not. But as someone focused on intimacy and sensual and sexual connection, hearing what you describe as a mess up, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this sounds like the best opportunity for him to really up his oral game.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for saying that. I think, okay. So that's a perfect segue into the next question I have for you, which is, how can we expand our definition of intimacy?
Okay, I am definitely going to answer that, but there's something else that might not come up again that that
Okay.
came to
Beautiful.
mind with what you just said. And that is that I think many men know this, but maybe not as consciously as they will if they hear me say this. And most women do not appreciate this. That, and I'm talking in a heterosexual context. Well, I'm talking in general, but I mean to apply it in a heterosexual context, that one of the things that brings a man tremendous pleasure, like so much more than we as women appreciate, is witnessing his woman having pleasure. And in fact, I think that this is something the multiple billion-dollar porn industry has tapped into, because there are exceptions and there are, a small percentage of different kinds of porn, but the vast majority of porn is filmed and produced through the male eyes, watching the woman have her orgasm, have her ecstasy. And that watching a woman in pleasure is what then gets him off on his, in front of his screen. And in case it sounds like it, I'm not encouraging porn. I'm not really meaning to address porn in one way or another. I'm just saying that this is something the porn industry has hacked and used with great success given their goals. And it's also true when there's no filming, no performance, no porn in a bedroom that, like, let me say that I've had many couples where she's willing to have sex. It's like duty sex, obligation sex. She knows it's super important to him and she wants him to do things for her, not in the bedroom. And so she has sex. I'm not talking about a sexless marriage, but there's no question that he feels the difference when, even if she's having an orgasm, it's because she's supposed to, not just supposed to have an orgasm, but supposed to have sex, versus she really is experiencing pleasure. And when a man has sex with a woman who is experiencing pleasure, he's never going to want to go back to having sex with a woman who's very responsible, but checked out from the perspective of her own body.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about expanding the definition of sex, as you just asked, but I want to be really clear that it's very easy for us women to get into a kind of transactional mindset. Like, if he does this for me, I need to do it for him. And if we're talking about oral sex during a time when there's not supposed to be ejaculation, it's not, the rule is not no penis and vagina, it's no ejaculation. So it's not like, you still could use your mouth and hands to provide a lot of pleasure for his penis without it getting to ejaculation. But I'm not even talking about that. Like, I'm talking about removing any sense of transactionality. There's no like parity here where he does this, so she needs to do that. And for a woman to learn to relax and realize that her experience of pleasure is fantastic for her, that part's obvious, and also really fantastic for him. The way for a woman to really be a generous lover is not to do all kinds of things to his body. That's great if you feel like doing it. But the way for a woman to be a generous lover is to let him experience your pleasure by maybe moaning a little bit more than you might be inclined to, or using words not with a running commentary that just takes you into your head and is not what I'm talking about, but like, yeah, oh, I love that. Or, I'm not a fan of performance because that just takes you out of the experience. But if you're already feeling good, whether it's your facial expression or the sound you're making or the way your body's moving, let the pleasure you're feeling be easily perceived by him. First of all, so he's not left wondering if he should change what he's doing. And second of all, because that really does bring him pleasure too. And if you're on the infertility journey and feeling betrayed by your body and like you can't do the thing the two of you want to be doing together with ease and spontaneity. Learning to experience more pleasure, to be more receptive, to not immediately reach up and do something to him, but instead savor what he's doing for you. That's not selfish. That may be one of the very best things the two of you can do that you can do for your relationship. And this is something you're going to take into the rest of your future in the sex you have, if this is the thing that inspires you to really experience more pleasure, the kind that's available with his attention and love and growing skill the more you do it, without any kind of penetration at all.
If you're listening right now and finding yourself nodding along, this is usually the moment people realize that they want support that's specific to them. In addition to this podcast, I offer one-on-one fertility consults where we look at your full picture with both strategy and compassion. You can learn more in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Mic drop. I mean, that's just so incredible. And I mean, I have so many thoughts, but what I want to share is that in my experience working with hundreds of women, thousands even, and even why I formed Love and Science was because I was seeing people cycle after cycle after cycle for whom their treatments were not working. And female physicians have a higher rate of that happening than non-physicians. And my coach friend, Roseanne Austin, has this expression. It's because these high achieving women, of which, we are in that group, right? She
Sure.
says, people are trying to get pregnant like a man. There's so much masculine energy. And I think you and I would agree that these are oversimplifications. But there's so much masculine energy that we have in our high achieving jobs. And that when people are trying to conceive, we say conceiving is receiving. And so how can we help women get into a more receptive energy? I have thoughts about this in terms of creativity and what you just said about sensuality. I think what you said is going to be helpful to high achieving women on the journey to get into that physiological state of receiving.
Yeah, that's a really profound point you make. And while I haven't thought about it quite like this ever before, I think what your friend said about high achieving women trying to get pregnant like a man, I think high achieving women, I need to qualify it because the first time I say it, it could so easily be misunderstood, but we tend to have sex like a man too. And I don't mean our genitals, I don't mean that at all, but I just mean like the speed with which we move from first kiss to penetration, or like we feel a pressure not to take too long to have our orgasm, where it really is more of a not always, like I'm a fan of variety, let me just say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that in general, the thing to cultivate in sex in any context for a woman is more receptivity, more of a leisurely feeling, more of timelessness, and just in a mindful way bringing attention to pleasure, that is the thing that makes us more receptive. And that can happen during rapid pounding. That can happen, I can be in a fundamentally receptive state when I'm on top. Like this is not about anything. I just feel a need to distinguish receptivity and passivity. Like
Yes.
that's not what this is about.
No.
Like whatever kind of sex you enjoy having, on whatever positions, whether it's like simpler, more vanilla, or you're into high sensation experiences and more adventure, like whatever it is, it can always be done with more receptivity. And when it comes to, like, I really like what you said about just more creativity, more mindfulness in general. But if we're specifically talking about sensuality and sexuality, the best way to become more receptive is to breathe deeply and bring your attention to your genitals, whether it's your perineum or your clitoris. Like, it doesn't need to be so anatomically specific, quite frankly. But I think, like, the next time, as you listen, the next time that you are having any kind of physical connection with your partner, whether you're kissing and making out, whether it's an embrace and you're both fully clothed, whether you're having penetrative sex and you're on the bottom, or whether you're having penetrative sex or you're on the top, or any version of a side position, like whatever it is, the next time you're in contact with one another, just breathe and bring your attention to where you're touching. And if you do that, but you're not in the habit of doing that, you will realize at some point that your mind went back to making sure you pick up the paper plates for the party, or, whatever it is that you're, or noticing that the shoes aren't lined up properly that you can see on the floor of your closet, or like, whatever it is, you won't notice when your attention leaves the present experience, the mindful way of connecting with your body. But you will notice once it has, and then you just bring it back. And to be like even more specific about this, I've been married for over 30 years, and so I have no idea how many times I have had sex and made love with my husband. I have no idea what the number is, especially since we met in medical school and the number was not so high during our training and residency. But anyway, it's some number of times. And so there are different phases. And I've had phases where the sex itself was just like less nourishing, less sensational. And whenever I've had a moment that's like that, I then breathe and just bring my attention back to my vagina or vulva or wherever the attention is. And I immediately have more sensation, more embodiment, and a better sense of connection with my husband.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that attention, right? The attention gets split in so many directions. And I think, that's the best gift we can give anybody in any context is our full attention. But there are so many things that make it so hard to do that. And so I love your idea about receiving. I love your idea about all different kinds of touch. Even I think you had this phrase about like non-sexual touch. And I want to talk about that, but I wanted to also say, okay, so if there are these rules that people are trying to abide by and people say, well, you know, everything that you say sounds well and good, but that's not part of anything that's ever been part of our experience. What do you recommend that people do? Where to start?
I recommend starting slowly, letting go of perfection and bringing in playfulness and curiosity instead. And I deeply believe that having a fantastic relationship is a learnable skill, and having a fantastic connected sexual life is learnable skill. Like, all of the things that we are talking about are learnable skills. I'm sure you've talked in other episodes about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, you just think people are the way they are. And so you work with what you got. And with a growth mindset, you orient to the fact that you can keep learning and your partner can keep learning and you can keep learning together. So when it comes to implementing any of the things we've been talking about, I suggest you start super small, really titrate down to where it's just a little bit of a stretch. It's slightly outside your comfort zone, but it's not going to blow you out. So maybe when it comes to expanding touch, sexual or not, you just start by holding hands. If you take a walk together, make a point of holding hands. That's a perfect next right step. I love how you close your support group sessions with what's your next right step. Well, a next right step after hearing this is if you haven't been holding hands for a while, hold hands. If you do, maybe taking a walk, maybe at dinner, you just reach over and take your partner's hand while you look them in the eyes and have a conversation and nothing else changes. It's just your hands are touching. Or if you're driving somewhere, you reach over and put your hand on his thigh or take his hand and hold it and have it on yours. Like that already, if you are not really touching except for time sex, that creates connection, ease, a little bit of delight. Depends on your marriage and your personalities if that leads to conversation or it's just something you enjoy without actually naming it. That's a great next step. If you're already affectionate in these ways, then maybe you hug, and I don't mean like a shoulder and an armpit kind of a hug like at 90 degrees, but you really do a full on embrace. And if you do that, just hold it a little longer than you usually do, because I do think that there are a lot of couples who hug, but it's the equivalent of like a peck on the cheek instead of a real kiss. And so, you're both clothed. This is not a moment for miscommunication. And I mean, a hug like that could be an invitation to get naked together, but it definitely does not need to be. So just embrace, breathe. Maybe you put your head on his shoulder. Maybe you lean up and kiss. But just staying in that embrace a little longer than you would previously is a great next step. And we could pick like lots of different examples. The point is, whatever is normal for you, what would be one thing to just increase connection without creating an existential crisis, without him turning to you and saying, "What are you doing?" No, just one next loving, affectionate touch.
That's a great idea. And I think the permission, right? You've just given everybody permission to do that and just experimenting and trying something a little bit different and seeing what happens.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of context in our conversation, and you're listening, you're a smart woman. It's going to feel like you want to give some explanations. I think this is probably an episode that if you feel it's relevant for you and you want to implement what we've been talking about, it's a really good one to have a date. And on your date, listen to the episode together. And by the way, don't do it like a good high achieving student where you start at the beginning and you stop at the end. Go ahead and, 3 minutes in, if something comes up or it makes you think of something or you just start crying or you start laughing, like let it be like inspiring connection, not to listen from start to finish so that you get all of the content. I do think that you want to listen to the whole thing together, but if it happens over 4 sittings, great. The point is not to absorb all the content. The point is to bring more sensual presence and connection into this phase of your marriage.
And I think that's absolutely beautiful. And maybe that's the access point. I'm thinking of the objections of my people, right? As they're listening. Like you said, maybe people just let this go. And I would love to do another episode in more depth on, okay, well, how do we even have this? Because this is not in a vacuum, right? This is in the context of a fertility journey, which is usually not going well. And people feel threatened with something that they've wanted more than anything is to become parents. People tell me, and I get chills thinking about this, like we've always known that we wanted to be parents. When I met my husband, I just knew what a great father he was going to be. A lot of people, I ask people their deepest why, why they're still on this journey, not judgmentally, but like,
Yes,
really
of
help me
course.
understand what the motivation is so that we can use that to dig deep when the times get hard. That's always very useful in my practice is to understand people's motivations. And a lot of it, many times, is related to how much people want to see their partners as a father. And there often is a, unity and I want to be a mom too and all those things. But this is it's so beautiful, but also so painful how much this has always been part of the vision for so many people. And then when this is all happening, then it challenges the identity and everything. And I have seen, I mean, this fertility journey can either become an opportunity for more closeness, as we've been describing, and people turn towards each other, and it's you and me versus infertility, not you versus me. But other times it can really drive a wedge in relationships. And I've even seen people get divorced over this. It's very painful. And even people stay in relationships longer than they want to because they're worried about not being able to generate more embryos because of their age at that point and things like that. So a big interest of mine is how can we, if possible, get people back on the same page because many people say, well, I just can't warm up to my husband because, he thinks we shouldn't spend any more money on this. And I really feel that we need to do at least one more cycle, or I really want to do donor egg IVF. And he's opposed to that. Like these big, big, big decisions and this context, I think sometimes can get in the way of this sensual flow and connection.
Yes, and I think you've outlined that so well, like the painfulness of it, and also that this is an opportunity to really dial in the quality of your connection, including sensual connection, but also we haven't really addressed it directly, but in so many ways, every part of this conversation has to do with improving and up-leveling the communication also so that there isn't confusion and there's just more ease and acceptance that all of that makes the challenging decisions, whether you're on the same page or the places where you're not, all of those navigations benefit tremendously from not just being on the same team, although I fully agree with that, but feeling fulfilled, feeling close with one another as partners.
Mhm. It's beautiful. And I think that deserves perhaps a full other conversation. But I think that, like you said, there's context to these things and to address that as well. And maybe it's that we say we're going to let that go and we're going to focus on the moment and the pleasure and what can we do and how can we reconnect. It's both and how can we carve out space to have these higher level conversations to make these really important decisions together.
Yeah, because to state again the obvious, but we sometimes forget, having moments of wonderful sensual connection, having moments of really hard, deep conversations, neither of those ever will detract from the journey. They will only enhance it.
Mhm. It's so true. Amazing. I think we need to end, even though we can talk
Okay.
for hours. This is so, so rich, so, so rich. And I just want to emphasize what you said about there are no rules against pleasure.
That's
Yes,
right.
we have
Rules
rules.
against ejaculation are completely different than rules
Yes,
against
yes,
pleasure.
yes, yes. So, and I always say that, people are like, but my ovaries are big and they're going to get bumped and they're going to rupture and like all these fear-based things. It's really hard to mess it up. And how can we focus on intimacy? How can we focus on pleasure? How can we remove the goal, so to speak? And, maybe the goal is to connect and to have a pleasurable experience together and to receive. It is a skill for us high achieving women. It is such a skill to disarm and receive and have that time. But in many ways, there's nothing more important that we can do. And let's cultivate that as well. So, Dr. Alexandra, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to hear in relation to this topic today?
Well, I know that there isn't anybody else really that I'm aware of talking about this the way that I do. And since we've already talked about doing another episode together, I really want to invite you, if you have a question or a topic or a theme that you want to cover more, or you've shared this episode with your husband and he has things to say, like whatever it is, go ahead and contact Dr. Erica. You can say how to find you, and we will be sure to include that in this next conversation, because the only reason you, Erica, and I are doing this is in order to benefit people. So if there's something that we could expand on and then it would be more valuable for you, just let us know, since we're going to record again.
Yeah. And you can send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. You can email me at loveandsciencefertility@gmail.com. Any of those places will work. I even have a form submission on my website. So always, always gearing our conversations towards what is most impactful and useful to our listeners. Dr. Alexander, where can people find you?
AlexandraStockwell.com is my website. And from there, you can find all of my social media links. I'm pretty active on Instagram at Intimacy Doctor. You can find my book, Uncompromising Intimacy, my podcast, my app, all of the things. And if you want to have a conversation with me, you can fill out the contact form. But all of that is at AlexandraStockwell.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Alexandra. I'm just so humbled by our connection and our friendship and our collaborations. It is so important to have these conversations. And I know that you are making the world a more pleasurable, more connected place by being it. Even in the last week, my coaching clients have shared so many beautiful examples of the impact that you've had in their lives, which just brings me so much joy. So thank you for being here. And to my listeners, as always, you know how much I love you. Until the next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Love and Science podcast. I'm so glad you joined us today. If you found this conversation valuable, if you could please rate, review, and share this podcast with your trusted people, it would mean so much to me. If you want more tools to help you navigate the fertility journey, please book a discovery call with me today. The link is in the show notes. Please do not let infertility have the final word. I'm here to take the burden from you so that you can achieve your goal of building your family. In gratitude, this is Dr. Erica Bove. I'm rooting for you always.